Hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome to your daily sit rep for Friday, the 26th of December, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shelby. Robert has the day off, so it's just Jared and me today. With that, let's go ahead and jump inside the Beltway here. Starting with this Obamacare subsidy expiration, House Speaker Mike Johnson is reportedly looking at two options to address the Obamacare subsidies, which were passed as a temporary measure back in 2020. 5 years later, somehow we still have them, and they are set to expire next week on the 31st of December. So option one includes pushing this GOP reconciliation bill that will fund the subsidies for another year. Some Republicans are in favor of this because they're very concerned about being wiped out in the midterms if Republicans do not address these healthcare subsidies. And they're just many Republicans are staunchly opposed to extending these subsidies. Option number two includes issuing direct cash payments from tariff revenues in order to offset rising healthcare costs. This is not real new. I only bring this up because it does expire next week. And apparently House Speaker Mike Johnson still does not know, at least according to this Political report, still not sure what they're going to do. Moving on here, the United States, the U.S.-Mexico counter-narco cooperation bill passed along with the NDAA, that's the National Defense Authorization Act of 2026. And this bill will require the U.S. intelligence community to submit a report to the Director of National Intelligence on any agency relationship with elements of the Mexican government, and also include strategies to enhance counter-narcotics cooperation and coordination with the Mexican government. This is important for a couple of reasons. Back several years ago, back during the presidency of Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, AMLO, there were a number of there's at least one joint U.S.-Mexican counter-narco unit that was disbanded. It included elements of the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, and allegedly that happened because AMLO said it was an issue of Mexican sovereignty. He did not want federal law enforcement working with Mexican law enforcement within the country of Mexico. But what it probably was, or likely was, these DEA agents were getting a little too close to some of these narco traffickers, and that reportedly had ties with AMLO. So this is very important because it looks like the United States is trying to rebuild some of this law enforcement and intelligence cooperation now with Mexico to go after these narco traffickers and cartels. The biggest thing here, the biggest impediment really is going to be Claudia Sheinbaum, who's the current president of Mexico. She seems a little more amenable to working with the United States, but very much only on the grounds that whatever cooperation there is approved and is acceptable to the Mexican government. Moving on here to the domestic sitrep, energy tech developer HGP Intelligent Energy proposed repurposing retired U.S. Navy nuclear power generators to increase U.S. grid resiliency. And this company requested two retired nuclear generators for a data center project in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And so the project would be scaled up at a lower cost than building new nuclear power plants. Jared, you're a Navy guy, briefly. You think this is viable? Just looking at there are these nuclear power generators, and these used to be on U.S. Navy ships, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so they're sitting in a hole in the ground somewhere or wherever they've been decommissioned to, and they basically want to exhume these things and repurpose them or try to rebuild them in order to increase domestic power generation.
Yeah, it looks that way. I don't know technically if they can do it, but at the very least they may get a proof of concept, and these are small reactors because they fit on submarines and inside of a 1,000-foot ship. So I think it will at least be a good step toward making them commercially viable.
Mm-hmm. Well, if they can get a proof of concept, I mean, that looks like a lot of power. Basically, these are SMRs, correct? Small modular reactors or something to that effect.
Yeah, they're certainly small reactors. I don't know how modular they are.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, according to this, each Navy A4W reactor can put out about 500 megawatts. That's enough for 360 homes if you're just doing some back of napkin math here. All right, moving on down to Mississippi. Mississippi federal district judge named Sherion Aycock ordered Mississippi officials to hold special elections for the Mississippi Supreme Court ahead of the 2026 elections. Judge Aycock ruled that the map that was used to elect the current Mississippi State Supreme Court violated the Voting Rights Act, Section 2. Just as a reminder, that is up for U.S. Supreme Court review, and it's, I think, fairly widely expected that the Supreme Court is going to strike down at least some sections, or some sections of the Voting Rights Act, including Section 2. So I'm not sure if this special election is going to occur before the Supreme Court issues this ruling, but certainly could complicate it. But this is important because this is almost certainly going to lead to a Democrat being elected to the Mississippi State Supreme Court based on this new map that she ordered. And again, this is probably going to happen before the Supreme Court ruling on these minority majority districts. Just as a reminder, if you're unfamiliar, there are something like 12 or 16 districts in the United States. I think they're predominantly, or maybe all of them are in the South. And you have these districts that are majority minority. So typically they're majority black populations. And the Voting Rights Act Section 2 says that they need their own black representative. So there's 12 or 16 of these districts that have, it's pretty much 100% locked that all those seats go to Democrats. Well, if the Supreme Court strikes down Section 2, then these state districts will be redrawn. And at least in the South, most of those, maybe all of them, will be flipped to Republicans, or at least reliably Republican districts. So that's going to have a huge impact on not only on majority minority representation, which, one of the issues I've been looking at is where's BLM? Where's Black Lives Matter in all of this? And they have had some really difficult times with corruption and loss of legitimacy, obviously. And they've been pretty, I think after President Trump was elected, even some of these BLM leaders said, yeah, we're going to sit this one out. We're not going to do this big national protest mobilization all over again. Not for Trump, at least. But this is one issue that may actually reignite some elements of BLM. And they did spend millions of dollars over the past few years to rehabilitate their image. I believe they hired a PR firm, and they rebranded their website, and they kind of spruced up their online presence. And so just kind of in the back of my mind that this may be one thing that could potentially reignite BLM. So at any rate, this is not only going to affect the balance of power in the House, but also will maybe have some effect on a new civil rights movement. Maybe some of these black political activist groups hold protests and marches to regain some of this representation. Moving on here, the United States is also headed towards its largest one-year drop in the murder rate in recorded U.S. history. There's a guy who's a criminal statistics expert. His name is Jeff Asher, and he said that according to this analysis, this amounted to about 12,000 fewer murders in 2024 to 2025 compared to the same period of 2020 to 2021. And Asher does acknowledge that the obvious critique is that crime reporting is down, which may have led to this drop in crime statistics. But you look at murders typically, someone typically reports those, whether it's a missing person or actual murder. So that seems to be a pretty good proxy for crime rate changes, because you can't not report a murder. Or if a body is found, you can't, no one's obviously not going to report that. All right, moving on here to Homeland Ops Brief. According to data published by ICE, they hold a record number of 68,000 detainees as of the 14th of December. That same data shows the Trump administration has detained 328,000 illegal aliens and deported about 327,000 since January. Also, over in Minneapolis, ICE announced before Christmas that they would not be holding any raids, and they notified this to the Catholic Church, that they would not be conducting any raids at Minnesota churches over the holidays DHS officials said that they would not enter churches or schools unless an imminent public safety threat was present. Staying in Minnesota, in West St. Paul, the city attorney's office charged a 63-year-old resident with obstructing legal processes with force and assault after he followed ICE agents with a firearm. ICE agents said the man was following them while they were conducting surveillance and then brandished a firearm. Moving back down to Mississippi, an activist group there called Mississippi United is coordinating a letter writing campaign to oppose this ICE operation called Operation Catahoula Crunch, which is ongoing in the greater New Orleans area. These letters were sent to Mississippi's congressional delegation, also to state and local officials, and they called on these officials to end cooperation with the Department of Homeland Security. Mississippi United says it has helped about 458 Mississippi residents make more than 13,000 contacts with 81 elected and public officials since September. This is important for a couple of reasons. Number one, the founder of Mississippi United, Kathleen O'Byrne, is also involved with the 50-51 movement in Mississippi. And second, part of these letter writing campaigns are to encourage Democrats to do more, to take more extreme measures. We heard this in March of this year. You had that senator from Connecticut, whose name escapes me at the moment. But he held this town hall meeting in Connecticut, and he said Democrats are going to have to take exceptional measures, number one. And so how do you push these Democrat politicians into taking exceptional measures? He said he and then also Indivisible's leaders, Indivisible's the country's largest protest organizing group. They said you have to create this groundswell of support, or at least the appearance of a groundswell of support, because Democrat politicians who feel like they have large-scale support from rank-and-file Democrats will do more to oppose ICE. So this appears to be probably the major reason or the major driver for this letter-writing push. And then finally, ICE awarded its first skip trace contract to a Geo Group subsidiary called BI Incorporated. That contract lasts for 2 years, and it started on the 16th of December. BI Incorporated is tasked with tracking down and verifying the location address information and also the investigation of alternative location information for non-detained illegal aliens facing court hearings. And that will probably be the first of many contracts. Moving on here to the Global Sitrep. Good morning, Jared.
Morning. We're going to start off here in Panama. The U.S. and Panama ran a drill earlier this month with U.S. Navy SEALs, the Army's 7th Special Forces Group, and the U.S. Embassy staff in the region or in the country, and Panamanian Special Forces, in order to practice securing an embassy, conducting high-value personnel extraction, and interagency cooperation. And the particular U.S. troop composition here was actually chosen because the SEALs are technically precise, and 7th Group provides regional expertise, showing that the U.S. military is actually bringing troops in. They're reallocating resources, quite frankly. And I think this shows that the U.S. is expecting high volatility in the region, and they are expecting to actually conduct these high-value personnel extractions around embassies. May not necessarily be U.S. embassies, though.
Well, hey, Jared, just to offer just an alternative take, it may not be that they expect to have to do this. Do we even have an embassy in Venezuela?
I think we technically still do. It may not be staffed, though.
Okay.
It's been a while, but there are other places where we may have an ally that needs personnel extraction.
Sure. Oh, well, let me say this, Jared. You may be right. This could be practice in expectation that we have to have some extractions of diplomatic personnel in some of these countries in South America. On the flip side, I think some of this stuff is fairly routine. Military interoperability and cooperation with U.S. partners and allies in Central and South America, like Panama. So I'll just throw that out there. I don't think it necessarily indicates that there's an expectation, but some of these elements. Actually, I think the Special Forces used to have, I think, a whole company dedicated to, it's called Commanders in Extremis, and they were pretty much solely dedicated to direct action missions, like embassy recovery and some other things. Those went away. I'm not sure what the status of those are, but I would kind of be surprised if there weren't still a company that was tasked with securing embassies, just as a contingency operation for U.S. Army Special Forces. So, sorry to interrupt with that, Jared. Please go ahead.
All right. Then moving over, basically next door, the blockade around Venezuela, Venezuelan oil specifically, has been ongoing, and it does appear to be having the intended effect. Ships previously headed for Venezuela have been tracked, either turning away or just pausing their trips, and this is according to public tracking data. Overall, this, without trying to editorialize too much, this is a positive. This shows that it is having the intended effect. This lowers the likelihood of a lethal encounter for the United States military and for Venezuelan and potentially other national I won't say forces, but personnel there. This also will enhance pressure on Maduro to leave office, as fewer ships are getting in there to buy oil, to transport oil, to bring in additional imports, all of which affects his ability to pay his people. Then yesterday, the president ordered the military to strike ISIS in northwest Nigeria due to them killing Christians explicitly. Now, the president warned that there will be many more dead terrorists if their slaughter of Christians continues. I think this does point towards the United States trying to make everybody aware they are serious about Christianity being central to the administration and the mission overall. And I think this will play into the goal outlined in the national security strategy of revitalizing the European and American civilizations, both of which largely have relied on Christianity as their religious pillar. Then over in China, a photo of a Chinese cargo ship loaded with containerized missile launchers and other combat systems circulated on Chinese social media yesterday. Now, we've covered these before. This is the first one I remember seeing actually a photo of. There's been plenty of concepts, though, and the containerized missiles are not new. But China permitting this to actually circulate, I think, demonstrates a misunderstanding or a lack of care on the Chinese's part about how this would actually affect the U.S.'s rules of engagement going forward, specifically around Chinese cargo ships, not cargo ships as a whole, because there are potentially very few ways to identify which ship is which unless you conduct mass surveillance ahead of time. This has potential downstream effects of just kind of, I won't say annihilating shipping, but definitely curbing shipping out of China in its entirety in the event of a Taiwan contingency. And on the note of a Taiwan contingency, the Japanese delegation that's currently visiting Taiwan said, and I'm going to quote here, "We have concluded that to make sure a Taiwan contingency does not happen, we need to beef up our deterrence capabilities." The delegation there did not elaborate on what methods they intend to use for beefing up deterrence capabilities or who we represent, but this was Japanese sitting lawmakers in Taiwan after speaking to the Taiwanese president and vice president, and then earlier this week, they actually met with the foreign minister as well. This, with the setting and everything, I think the main on its face read will be that Japan and Taiwan they want to run more joint efforts to prevent China from taking Taiwan. Just open collaboration between their coast guards and possibly their militaries as well, even though they are not saying it outright.
All right, thanks for that, Jared. Appreciate that. And with that, I think we do have some questions and comments we will get to here. There's one question here regarding China and their ability to use swarms. And I guess that's drone swarms. How's our strategic plan and ability measuring up to what China's is or Chinese capabilities? Can we combat them on that battlefield? Well, Jared, that's definitely your world. How is U.S. drone swarm defense sizing up to Chinese capabilities, or is it at all?
First off, nobody's drone swarm defense capabilities are really all that good. It's too new. The sword has been built, the shield not. That said, from what I've seen over the last about a year now, the U.S.'s drone defense capabilities have been ramping up, I think, better than pretty much anybody else's. However, I do want to remind people, drone swarms are likely not to be used too much in a war with China outside of the immediate area of Taiwan, because you're limited by range and speed and payload. Just, they're not really good anti-ship weapons. They just aren't. I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, you can't have these. I mean, these things are not going to be loitering for days, just flying around searching for a ship to strike. That makes a lot of sense. All right. Isn't BLM being investigated for stealing the money donated? Yes, there have been some charges, I think maybe even convictions of a handful of BLM officials. And this is the movement for Black Lives. This is the actual BLM organization. And it has been confirmed that they funneled, I think, probably millions of dollars for personal use. I don't recall all the details, but that is true. All right. At this rate, we'll have those 40-ish million illegals out by the year 2140. So listen, I completely understand your sentiment. And you look at that number, was it 370,000 deportations so far since January, 327,000 out of at least 20 million that came in during Obama. And I get that. But remember, the administration has been harangued through the courts. And then ICE is also trying to ramp up these 10,000 new ICE agents to hit the streets. So I think there's going to be a number of factors. Number one, blue states and these cities will continue to not cooperate and probably try to hamstring as much as possible through legal channels. You're also dealing with some on-the-ground problems with these activist groups, and in some cases, militant actions, assault, armed activists. And then the other part of this too is at some point there will be, just through the law of diminishing returns, if these sweeps, if they're having to go after these people individually, then it's going to take forever. Will probably not happen. But these sweeps that are targeting these farms and these construction sites where they're getting 15, 20, 100 illegals in one swoop, it seems to me like that has to continue to be the big focus here. And so at any rate, point being, I think I would expect that the rate of capture will increase as more ICE agents hit the streets, especially in some of these red states where they will have the overwhelming support of these county sheriffs to go after people. All right, we have, there's an SMR, I believe this is what this is, at Reed College in Portland. Do you know how these old ones would compare in size to what's used in a school like this? Well, Jared, I'm not sure this, and apparently there's someone in the comments saying that these Navy nuclear reactors will not work. However, one of these Navy A4W reactors can power about 360,000 homes. So I don't know what these SMRs, these backyard nukes that are put in place at some of these colleges. I know at least one university in Texas has one as well. Jared, do you have any idea how the Navy nukes would compare to SMRs that are rolling out?
I don't.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. Oh, fair enough. What's the easiest way to nullify a data grab, digital hygiene, digital rejection in real life? Well, there are a number of services that you can pay for that will scrub. Well, I say scrub. It will remove your personal information from some of the most popular databases. But remember, the internet is forever. So once you have your personal information stored somewhere, it's very easy to replicate. It's nearly free to store. I mean, just the storage costs are abysmally low. And so storage is not an issue. And then that data can be sold multiple times. But in general, if you don't want to get commercial mailers and phone calls and some things like that, you can cut down on the amount of personal information you have in these databases. And I don't remember exactly what they are, but I do know there's some services, and if you know, please drop it in the chat, and I'll try to remember which ones may be good. All right, will the Supreme Court be striking down Trump's authority to send National Guard troops to Chicago, with the Supreme Court doing that? Do you believe he'll send in Marines or regular Army troops? Well, I did see over Christmas that Trump was thinking about sending in Marines. That's something we also heard earlier this year. Actually, well, he sent Marines into Los Angeles for a different reason. So I'm not sure. I know that Secretary of Defense / War Pete Hegseth said that he is on board whichever military components the president wants to use. Hegseth said the president's going to get. That is a much better question for Robert, and Robert will be back on Monday, and we'll save this question for them as well. All right. Any other questions you see here, Jared? Kind of a short day as well, because it's the day after Christmas. But that, we only take off real holidays around here. I think it's Daryl says, I've been using both Delete Me and Identity Guard for several years, and I'm happy with both. All right, so Helen, you might check those out, Delete Me and Identity Guard. And then there's another comment that says, if you ask these companies to delete your data, they won't really delete it. They just set a flag in the database to mark it deleted. We call this soft delete. The data still exists. That's a fair point. I think one thing they do is they don't make it commercially available, so they cannot sell data that has been requested to be deleted. Of course, whether they delete it or not, you raise a great point. Maybe they don't. You can also do this. A lot of these websites, listen, the reason I use a service like this, and the reason I use a service is because I pay these, I think that's like 10 or 15 bucks a month or something like that. And they stay on top of things. They continue to search for personally identifiable information in these commercial databases. Number one. The second reason is you can individually go to all these different data clearing houses individually and request. You just have to send an email address with a deletion request. You might have to use a form or use some kind of template that they want you to use. You may have to try to prove your identity somehow. I don't know. I'm sure they make it as difficult as possible. But for 10 bucks a month, I think the one I use, and I don't even remember what it's called, but it deletes at like the 52 databases or something like that, if I recall correctly. So I think if you're concerned about your personally identifiable information being online, number one, once it's leaked, you're not going to do anything about it. But if you're trying to cut down on unwanted phone calls and mailers and stuff like that, by the way, I'll just tell you this quick story here. Back when about maybe it was right around the time that my wife got pregnant, I received a magazine at my parents' house, and I hadn't lived there for like, I don't know, 10 or 15 plus years, probably actually 15 or 20 years. But I received an issue of Vogue magazine, the baby or the pregnancy edition or something like that, in my name to my parents' house right around the time my wife got pregnant. So, you've all heard of those algorithms where Amazon can tell that you're pregnant, whatever, based on shopping habits. I don't know, whatever it is, or Google searches, I'm sure. But all that stuff is real. I mean, it's just out of nowhere. I get this pregnancy issue right around that time. So I just say that to say there's all these commercial data centers will make great use of your personal information. All right. You're savage on Twitter, Mike. Keep it up. I love it. I have been getting a little spicy on Twitter over on X. We try to stay straight-laced, middle of the road as much as possible, not too much editorializing here on the show. But yes, if you want my spicy hot takes, head over to X at Grayzone Intel. All right. Maybe they listen to every word you say through the phone. That may be true as well. I've heard a lot of those stories where people say, I was telling my wife I wanted a pair of blue swim trunks, and then I got on my phone and I got this ad from Amazon for blue swim trunks. I've heard a lot of those stories. I don't know. I mean, I don't have any reason to doubt that they're true. I don't think people are lying about it. So that may also be a possibility. And last question here, follow up, would Trump have to use the Insurrection Act to do so? That's another Robert question. Robert is much better versed on the legality of that. So first of all, no, Trump would not necessarily have to use the Insurrection Act because there's a mission called MACDIS, at least in the Army. I'm sure it's DoD wide. It's military assistance to civil disturbances. And under the MACDIS mission, you can have active, like regular Army components deploy to a city or to a region under civilian command. They have their military command, but the military commander answers to a civilian, and that's the mayor or maybe the governor or maybe some DHS civilian. I'm not sure exactly. Robert may know better. So, no, President Trump could deploy Marines under MACDIS mission without invoking the Insurrection Act, and I do know that. All right, with that, everyone, thanks so much for your support. Hope you have I don't know, whatever happy fake holiday today is, and a great rest of your Friday and a great rest of your weekend. We will be back on Monday, back in your inbox Monday morning, back on the show starting at 08 Central Time. Until then, be well and stay out front.